we can kind of start recording and then just forget about it, hopefully.
Yeah, that would be ideal.
I know. I already feel a little, now I'm like, oh no, we're
I
recording.
know, me too. I feel very awkward. Like I'm like, what is the protocol here? Like what is the appropriate thing? It's interesting how much it like changes the normal flow of conversation.
Totally. I'm feeling yeah, like something's like running around inside of me a little bit.
Yes. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, which is like all that I really want to talk about right now, even though I feel like there's like other things we're supposed to be talking about.
All you want to talk about is the thing running around
Yeah,
because we're
exactly.
recording. Yeah,
Yeah.
we can talk about that. We should just talk
And
about that.
let's talk about that and like how
The phenomenon of recording and like what it does to you somatically.
exactly. That seems like the thing that's most present. So
Well, I feel like that is really real and links into what we were going to talk about, honestly.
yeah, I do too. I totally do too.
Um, and it like obviously like we were having a private conversation on Wednesday, but like um I thought about because when we had the interruption and then after the interruption you were like I still like even many minutes afterwards you were like I still feel like disrupted on some level.
Yeah, totally.
And I thought like, oh, that is I feel like that is one of the biggest themes of what I of our question of like what do you get out of Feldenkrais? And it was like
Mm.
that sort of discernment.
Mm. Mm. Like the ability to feel that disruption.
Exactly, and to note it and to be like, oh, it has a duration. Like it's not just that like we were interrupted for a moment. Like I think anyone would notice like an interruption on some level, but like the fact that like it stays in your body or like it stays with you and you're still feeling it and noticing it like minutes afterwards, like that sort of thing felt like that's such a Feldenkrais thing to me.
Totally, totally. And so I just, oh my gosh, I have two things I want to say. One is like some part of me is like putting back on the like we're doing a podcast like hat and wants to say, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we were thinking about talking about was what do we get out of Feldenkrais, right? That was our question.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a really good segue, but for some reason I just felt the need to say that explicitly. And
No,
then,
I think you should. Yeah.
okay, good, because I did. Phew. Um, and then oh, it's so funny. So then I'm like, well, I could name another fear, which is like the fear that like one's gonna come across as just like a total jerk, you know? Or like
Mhm.
I was gonna say a-hole, but like because we mentioned that little thing about cursing, I don't know, I censored myself. Uh,
Yeah, I
okay.
think we can curse. I mean, I want to curse.
All right, if you want to curse, then definitely do it. I
I'll try
think
not to be too um fast and loose with it, but it's gonna happen. So
that's so funny. It makes it sound like a fart.
that's awesome. That'll happen too, but that's easily editable.
That's true. Um, all right, but I want to go back because we were saying, yeah, like, okay, so being able to notice that disruption and how it feels in our body and how long it lasts. And then I think too, like just encouraged or like given the permission to not have to do anything, right? To not have to override that or push it to the background or like just
Mm-hmm.
get on with things anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think is, I don't know, that's definitely something I get out of it. And then I th- I think then you kind of get to feel like how long it takes for it to like resolve itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so when you say that, like what I think is just like the container it creates, or like the space that you get
Mhm.
to to allow for those things to happen. And it's like almost even prior to them happening, like
Yeah.
notice, like it's like, okay, there's space right now. There's, I don't know, sometimes I think of it as like the pause or something. Like there's space within this pause where I can actually let what's happening happen, when it seems like in normal life or like normal time and space, it's not, doesn't feel like that. It's like I can't feel like this right now, or I, there's other things taking precedent.
Yeah, totally.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think about how part of the container is that the teacher does like ask you to do something, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
if you're lying on your back and one leg is long and one foot is standing on the floor, they may ask you to like roll your pelvis to the leg that's long, right? But
Mm-hmm.
but you don't actually have to roll your pelvis, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
like feel. And in fact, sometimes like the question I ask myself is like, do I even want to roll my pelvis right now? You know? And like often the answer is no. I'm like, I actually don't really want to roll my pelvis right now. So then I'm like, okay, like if I feel into that, then what happens? And then I feel like that's when I start to like, yeah, just feel all these interesting things, or like the journey begins or something. And
I love that you said that. Oh, sorry.
oh, yeah, please. Why do you love that? Yeah.
Because when you were saying the previous thing that you said, before I started talking about the pause, I was thinking about, but what if I don't want to what if I don't want to feel something, or what if I don't want to move in some way?
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and I think we only hear that in that container too, like in a way. And I
Yeah.
agree with you, like that's the beginning right there, like that is often where the stuff is to be found, or at least the beginning of the stuff is to be found. It's just like, even in recognizing I'm not going to mindlessly just like follow the instructions. I mean, I can do that, that's fine too,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
also like, oh, I don't want to. And then it's kind of like existing within that question of like, why don't I want to, or like what is going on, that like the answer is no for me, or whatever it would be.
Yes. And you can then you can take it into your thoughts, right? And maybe you have some thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you have like a strong emotional response to it. Or maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's just like a sensation in your body where you're like, oh, it just feels like, I don't know, like there's something that gets a little stuck there and I don't really feel like pushing through it, you know? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can kind of go a little lower and feel like, well, what's going on down there, right? And does that feel good? Does that feel easy? Okay, maybe I'll hang out there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I find like, sure, sometimes like I'm having this kind of like discursive, I hope I use that word right, but like conversation with myself, like, going between thinking, feeling, sensing, and probably other things. But then other times it's like I can get to that place where it feels like like all of that just kind of disappears and it just feels like opening after opening happens,
Mm.
which for me I feel like is kind of a sweet spot, but like sometimes I'm reluctant to share that because I feel like it sets up some sort of like goal or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sort of idea like, oh, if you're not experiencing that, then you're not doing it right. Which I I don't know. I know I'm supposed to say that's not true.
Right, right.
And on a lot of levels, I do feel like no, 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 no. Like wherever you're at, like whatever experience you're having, like that is really like that's where you need to be. But I
Right.
kind of feel like there's this like honey at the bottom of the pot, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And It's like it is there if if you want it.
Right. If and it but I think I agree with you that it somehow um when you know about the honey at the bottom of the pot, sometimes it's problematic
Yeah.
then because expectation you expect the
Mhm.
honey at the bottom of the pot and it's like
Yeah.
sometimes that's not what's going on. Sometimes you can't. I don't know if it's an attention thing, an awareness thing, like
Yeah.
some days or times you just don't have the span for it. I'm not sure what it's about, but it's like sometimes you don't when you don't drop into it and you know the honey exists, it's like,
Oh, yeah.
oh my God, why don't I get the honey? Um, and
Yes.
that can be really frustrating. And it's like
Yes.
oh my God, I'm like scared to bring in the word healing because it's like oof, loaded, but like it's kind of like I think expectation of that sort is one of the biggest obstacles to
Yes.
healing. Or maybe if we're staying in our lane in terms of Feldenkrais, like maybe it's one of the biggest obstacles to learning.
Right.
Um,
That distinction. Yeah.
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 But I back up a little bit or
Yeah, please.
because I was just gonna say, like, I think like with our question of like, um, what is it? What do you get out of Feldenkrais? That's what we're kind of working with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just having the vocabulary, and it's like I don't always think of like it's this like language based vocabulary, but we learn this sensory vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And just what you were saying of like to even be able again this is another like kind of differentiation like distinction thing like just to be able to realize oh I'm in the honey place right now. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I think when we start Feldenkrais we often start from a place of like well what does it even mean to be comfortable, what does it even mean to feel pleasure, what does it even mean for this movement to feel easy. um and then like over time you get these kind of layers of ease or layers of pleasure or layers of comfort, and you can distinguish like oh like because even what you were talking about sounds very like sophisticated to me in a way, like it's like obvious that you've had a lot of experience with it and it's like
Mm-hmm.
to even know those places. But I think like
Mm-hmm.
that was something when I was thinking about the question you asked for the last few days, like that was something big that came up for me, like knowing these different levels of comfort or like knowing these different like this whole kind of body vocabulary of what comfort feels like or like what good feels like.
Mm-hmm.
um I don't know if that makes sense to bring up, but
It totally does. Yeah. I'm thinking, yeah, like, yeah, I'm thinking, so one thing is like David sometimes says like when it feels good, it feels good, right?
mhm,
And that I think for me in the beginning, like just learning how to trust that, like it took me a really, really long time. Like I used to injure myself in Feldenkrais classes all the time. Um,
mm.
and I used to like lie on a hard floor and just be really uncomfortable, like in positions that were not comfortable for me because I thought that like somehow if I stayed in the discomfort, like that's how I would.
Mm,
And I think a lot of us have like learned that way. And I mean, I think
yeah.
there is learning that can happen there. I know because like, we've I've learned things from that. And there are like
Totally.
practices where you intentionally cultivate discomfort, right?
Yeah.
But that's really like not what Feldenkrais was asking us to do. And
Hmm.
um, so I think that there were so many times when like if I had been honest with myself, I would have been like, oh, actually, I am so uncomfortable, but like I am staying here because I feel like there's something I'm gonna gain if I do, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've I resonate with that too because I feel like I think in the beginning for me, I was like, when I would ask that question, like, is there something I could do to make myself more comfortable? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I would be like, I feel like something, I don't, some sort of like psychological thing was in the way of like, no, but I should be comfortable as
Oh,
it is.
totally.
I
Totally.
don't want another blanket. Like it should
Yeah.
be fine. Like,
Totally. Yeah. Like I don't want to have to get up and move even though everyone's
yeah.
lying on the ground, you know? Like it's like, all this stuff. Yeah.
Or like
Or
if I take a prop, does it mean something
yes.
about me? Like,
Oh my God, that was a huge one. Yeah. Like someone in my
yeah.
training, he like, I mean, to me, when you look at him, he kind of just looks like a skeleton. And so I feel like, because in Feldenkrais, like sometimes we use the skeleton as like the symbol of like ideal movement or something. Um,
Mhm.
like movement without like muscular or inefficiency, right? And so for me, I would look at him and I'd be like, well, yeah, of course, like things go through him so quickly and easily because he just like looks like a skeleton. And he would say like when we're lying on our side, like he would be like, "Oh yeah, you should totally be able to lie on your side without head support and have your like head and neck be free, right?" And so
Mhm.
then I was like, "Okay, well, I'm not going to use pads because like that's if that's what we're trying to do, like I'm just going to put myself in that position,
Mhm.
and then figure out like how to find comfort in it." But I don't, yeah, I think that took a really long time and I don't really think that it got me too far. And I remember when I was in a workshop with Mia, like one of the first things she did in a sideline lesson is she walked over and she gave me head supports. And she was like, "You'll be more comfortable if you put these under your head."
That's amazing.
You know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so like it's so it feels so simple but so complex. I guess it's elusive obvious, but like it's I feel like I've spent like I'll be like doing an ATM or something, and then all of a sudden, like I'll be like, I don't know, a quarter way through, third of way through, and then I'm all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not comfortable at all.
Totally.
Like still that happens, and then I can spend the rest of the ATM just being like, is this comfortable? No. Is this comfortable?
Yeah.
A little bit. Like, is this comfortable? Maybe. Like, it's just like then that becomes
Oh yeah.
the exploration, and it's just like it seems like it's like endless. Like
Yeah.
just these like little degrees of like, does this actually feel good? um
Do you find that that's helpful, or do you feel like there was something that you could have done like outside of participating in the ATM that you would have been?
hmm. I feel like sometimes it's helpful and sometimes I'm like, uh it feels like very like, what do I want to say? The thing that comes to mind is like I'm looking for a needle in a haystack. Like it feels like this like impossible task sometimes,
Yes,
and that I'm kind of making myself crazy trying to seek it. And then
yes.
sometimes I come to kind of a question of like, it's an interesting thing because it's like if I can't find it, I'm like, what do you do then? What do you do I like do I just take it just purely imagining place? Because we can do that too. And interestingly, like when I started Feldenkrais, I was like not comfortable at all with like many things. And most of what I did in the beginning of my training and all of that was I would just imagine, like I wouldn't move. I
Mhm.
would just imagine things.
Yeah.
And then that became a habit, and that was a bit, and then I got kind of, I was like, maybe I
Mhm.
need to try to move. Um,
Mhm.
because it's interesting because some of the lessons that we do, some of the things we do, it does seem like you do need to move.
Mhm.
So I go back and forth of like if I'm in that place of like I can't seem to find it, or I'm agitated, or the movement doesn't feel good. Sometimes I'm like, well, should I just, I mean, I can do the movement. Like, should I just do it, or should I like just give up on the whole thing? Like, I don't know
Mm.
if that makes sense. I don't know if I answered your question, to be honest.
No, it does. It makes a lot of sense. There's so many things. I mean, one thing I think about is like, well, the first thing I thought about was when you're giving someone a private lesson, right? So
Hmm.
Feldenkrais method has two parts, right? There's the group lessons, which are awareness through movement, where the teacher usually just gives verbal instructions, right? And lots of different people can be participating. And then there's functional integration, which are the private lessons where it can be verbal instructions or it can also be like hands-on, where we're either just feeling the person while they move or we're actually moving them. There's like a lot of, yeah, possibilities in that. So sometimes when I've worked with people who are in acute pain and I'm
Hmm.
trying to help them find comfort, like if I make that the priority, and sometimes and often, like we can't find comfort for,
Hmm. Hmm.
and especially not complete comfort. And what I
Hmm.
find myself doing is like chasing the pain in a way.
Hmm.
So it's just, and then like we spend like an hour doing that. And yeah, I mean, I think we both come away feeling kind of like frustrated and,
Hmm.
I feel like,
Defeated.
yeah, it's defeated. Exactly. And I feel like I've kind of failed them and I failed the Feldenkrais method because I know that it's helped so many people, right? But like,
Hmm.
it's just, I couldn't, yeah, I just couldn't figure out a way to like, yeah, find something that would be it's like I set up, yeah, so I don't know, just that sometimes finding comfort can be a trap, I think.
Yeah,
Um
because well, I think the kind of trap that I get in is like if I override the fact that I'm in discomfort right now and I do the movement, is
mhm.
that somehow like dishonoring myself and like the
Yes.
discomfort I feel? But
Yeah.
sometimes that sweetness can be found in the movement.
Yes.
Um, it's a very paradoxical, and I think that's a juicy aspect of this method is that there,
Yeah.
I mean, paradoxes um, often where you find a lot of richness. And I think
Yeah.
Feldenkrais has ample examples of paradoxes. Um, but it's like, yeah, it can be a sticky place when I'm like trying to figure out, yeah, what I want to do, or
Yes.
not, or don't want to do.
Yes.
And like
Yeah.
I said, like imagining just pure, like just laying down and purely imagining in the beginning was like wonderful for me. But it came to a point too where it was like, but there is something else I'm missing by not moving.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think about that, like that how much Feldenkrais thought about action and like our ability to act in the world.
Hmm.
And I think I'm thinking of this one instance where I was in a workshop and it had like the room we were in was really, really cold and the floor was really hard. And so I was like, by the end of the workshop, I was choosing to do the lessons lying on a table just to have a bit more comfort and to be up a little higher where the air was a little warmer.
Hmm.
And I'm like totally bundled up and we're just doing a simple like pelvic tilt lesson, right? So lying on our back, knees bent, feet standing on the floor, just like tilting our pelvis a little, I think backwards and then forwards. And like I felt like I couldn't move, like
Mm.
almost like I was in a freeze response or something or freeze.
Mm.
And I feel like it's because I like had this idea that like, oh yeah, if I feel like anything that feels like effort or feels like resistance, um
Yeah.
like I'm not doing it right or
Yes.
right kind of perfectionist comes in. Um and I just was like, I don't know, at all, and just all of the like layers of things that I've heard my teacher say, right? And the things that
Mhm.
I've interpreted and come to this idea of what ideal movement is. And all of
Yeah.
a sudden, I was just like, in my mind, I was like, you know how to move, right? And so like, and then
Yeah.
I started tilting my pelvis forwards and backwards. And it was like, sure, like my tone had to increase a little bit, right? So I did feel some
Uh-huh.
like effort, and maybe it wasn't purely skeletal and a little bit more muscular, but it felt like so liberating. And I was just like, oh my God, like, if I was like basically in any other situation, like all of the other things that I love doing in my life where my body gets to move, like I would have no problem doing this movement whatsoever, right?
Hmm.
It was like something about the context of being in an ATM in a workshop that I just felt like, yeah, there was just like layer upon layer of things that was telling me like not to move. Um, or I
Yeah.
was using to tell myself not to move. So I find like when I teach now, I'm like I try to be conscientious with my language so that um I don't know, I was gonna say so that people don't develop a freeze response, but I mean, like I'm not saying it's only Feldenkrais, like there are all different ways that we freeze, in life. But that's
Yeah.
I don't know,
Oh,
that's
sorry.
coming to mind. Please, yeah, pick it up.
N- No, it's beautiful. I think I've been in the same place, and I think I want to take it back to your honey pot example because it's like once you've tasted the honey, it's kind of like, well,
Okay.
shouldn't it always feel this way? Like
Right.
I I had this ideal of like effort, like it should just feel like so seamless and like effortless and like it's like the reality of like some of these lessons. I mean, some of these lessons is like you need to be like putting a little bit of effort into some of these movements. Like it's like you don't want to be like straining yourself or like your example of like, well, I have to be uncomfortable or else I'm not working, like the no pain, no gain cultural thing we have going on. But like, it's like, it's hard to find the balance of like, what is the right amount of effort that's going to help me do this movement. So the end that's toned down, the volume's down low enough that I can feel what's going on in myself, like everywhere else, like, but also not get in the freeze place of like, oh, well, like this isn't seamless, perfect, yummy, honey, like
Yeah.
movement, so I shouldn't do anything at all. Um,
Yeah.
it's a hard place to be.
Yeah.
And I think it's a hard, and like you said with teaching, like I think your teaching is amazing.
Thank
But
you.
I think like it's hard to speak to this stuff. Especially yeah, like um yeah, it's hard to touch these places, I think, verbally sometimes, and um in the context of a lesson when you're trying to get, trying to just teach the lesson at the same time, right? It's like,
To a lot of
how much do you touch on the like phenomenology of doing an ATM versus like, well, we're just trying to go around the clock here or whatever it is.
right, right. Keep it casual. Like,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
usually like, no two people are alike. So, you also find yourself being like, okay, well, I think this person maybe needs this, but that person, I think I would say
Mm-hmm.
to them too, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but well, I feel like, oh, okay, here's a question. So,
Okay.
I feel like this topic of freeze is like really interesting to me, and I can think of things to say about it, but I
Yeah,
also feel like maybe it's such a big topic that it's good to like have it be its own episode. What do you think?
I'm down with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as possible, I want us to be able to be like honest too, because I know
Yeah.
part of why we've tried so many things is because like
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like I just want to be able to give honest feedback to people about yeah, just
Yes.
what our experiences have been so that other people who are out there seeking things can yeah, just know that for themselves as they try things out. And it doesn't mean don't try the things, right? But I think it can just I don't know, it can kind of help you trust your own responses better, especially when
Hmm.
they're negative, if you've like if you hear other people have had similar negative responses, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And um I agree. I really agree with all of that.
And if not
Um
just purely negative, mixed. Maybe I would say that. It's more like mixed responses.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, something too I feel like we talked about on Wednesday, and I'm straying a little bit, is just like
Yeah.
this kind of process of evolving, I think. And I think like that also speaks to like why we've tried so many different things. Like I think I keep going back to the honey pot because it's a rich metaphor for all of this, but it's like I think when you are seeking, there's such a desire for like, I want to find the thing, and it's going to be like the best thing, and it's going to be like it's going to heal me, and it's going to like, I was healed by it, and like all of this. And it's like, there's so much like projection and idealization going on in that kind of seeking. And I think that leads to like, also kind of like crazy making, like, I'm going to try everything out because it's like, it is this process unfolding, and it's like I think we find some things more helpful than others, and also that's true at different times.
Yes.
Like in my early 20s, like I really liked uh like craniosacral therapy, and like I never do that now. Like I just don't. And I
Oh,
like would be like, I don't trust it. Like I would go kind of like get extreme about it now, but like,
yes.
at one point I found it like life saving. And I think that's interesting too, that these things kind of come and go, or whatever it may be.
Totally. I think that's really interesting. Like I'm like I wonder about like intimacy or attachment or
Mm,
all these things that are part of what we're experiencing, right? When we're trying these different modalities.
mm-hmm.
So that sounds like a really good topic too. Yeah. So what do we get out of Feldenkrais?
I mean,
So
we could do another one on this
I
too.
know we could, and I'm like, my next question is like, well, what brought us to Feldenkrais? And that might help.
Mm-hmm.
But besides like the honey, the place, I guess I know I am definitely in less pain now than I was before I did Feldenkrais.
Yeah,
You as well? Is that because I
I
feel like
would say, yeah,
that's why I
that's
feel
like the simplest answer. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, totally. So definitely that, less pain.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But it took a while for me. But
Me
that's
too.
something, yeah. So stick with it.
Oh yes, yes. We got on the Zoom call. I was trying to remember like what did it feel like when I first started doing Feldenkrais, and I just like,
Hey, sorry about that. We are using the free version, and that means that we time out around 40 minutes. So we appreciate your patience. Sorry for the interruption, and let's get back to the conversation between Alex and me.
okay, are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
I mean, it's annoying. We're the free version.
Yes.
But there's also
The-
part of me that's like, yeah, like we're doing it with the free version.
yeah, or we're like doing the ratchet podcasting.
Exactly. So there's that like enforced 8-minute pause.
Yeah, we had time to reflect and
Yeah, there was a lot of deep reflection going on over here.
yeah, it was very deep. I got real deep. I got to the honey pot.
Wow. So I think you were saying you were trying to remember back what it was like to when you first started doing Feldenkrais, and I think that would be yeah, another great thing to talk about, maybe even next. Uh,
Yeah, that we
next,
could do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just saying that I just remember it feeling like magic to me. And
Mm,
the vibe I get is that most people coming into trainings have that feeling too. And that's like the first year or two in trainings, it's just like there's this like magical bliss undertone. I mean, it gets real too and like crazy, but
mm.
um I feel like there's a lot of that like magic.
I want to talk about this more.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So that was our first podcast. We did it. Thank you so much for listening and giving us your attention. And we need a tagline. We don't have a tagline yet, so I don't know what to say, but thank you. More soon.